Hello and welcome everybody to today's episode of the JBA All In podcast.
Our podcast is currently streaming on Podbean and YouTube. The JBA All In Podcast is your one-stop sports shop podcast for news around the sports world.
My name is Jack,
My name is Brendan.
and we have a very stacked lineup of segments and news today, so let's jump right into it.
All right, it's time for the hot topic, everyone. Thursday night was the other day. The Cleveland Browns beat the Cincinnati Bengals. The matchup, Baker versus Burrow. Baker came out on top with a score of 35-30. Browns won. It was a good game for both sides. So, Jack, what were your thoughts of the Thursday night game? How did the Browns look? How did the Bengals look? Just overall, any positives and negatives for both teams?
I think it's kind of, I really don't think it's a surprise that the Browns won. The Browns are kind of a team that people hyped up, and then once they lose one game, they're like, oh, they suck. But I don't think I don't think they're an amazing team by any means, but I don't think they're as bad as people are painting them. The Bengals were able to hold on, which shows that they aren't terrible. Like, the Bengals are actually good. Joe Burrow is actually looking really good so far. He threw the ball 61 times. He went 37 for 61 with 316 yards, 3 touchdowns, and no interceptions. The problem with that was his QB rating, I believe, was in the 60s. So he had a good game when you look at the top layer of the stats, but when you really look into it, he had a pretty average game. But it's looking really promising for Joe Burrow. You immediately throw a rookie into there, and usually, obviously you want him to succeed, but we look back at previous draft busts who started immediately, and they didn't really start out well, or they just didn't really look that promising. But Joe Burrow actually looks really good. I think I thought he was going to be a draft bust, but with how he's playing right now, he looks pretty good, and he looks like he's going to be good to stay. And Baker Mayfield, everyone's writing on Baker Mayfield. I don't think you should write off Baker Mayfield yet. The Browns kind of relied on the run game. Nick Chubb at 124 yards, Kareem Hunt at 86 yards. Baker threw 23 times. He went 16 for 23, 219 yards, 2 touchdowns, and a pick. That's a pretty good game for Baker, too. He's not as bad as everyone's saying he is. Again, they did really go with the run game more often because the Bengals were throwing it 61 times, which is crazy. Joe Mixon only carried it 16 times, while Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt both were, or Nick Chubb 22, Kareem Hunt 10. So I think it was a good game for both sides. The Bengals are really showing promise. The Browns kind of bounced back. Obviously, they have only won by 5 points against the Bengals, but it's looking pretty good for both sides, especially with both quarterbacks. Both quarterbacks played pretty decently, and you might even say well. And the receiving core for the Browns and the Bengals had a pretty good game, especially the Browns' running game. They had a stellar game. So, I think the Bengals have a lot of potential. We're just trying to see what the Browns are going to be like the rest of the season, because I did take a tough loss game 1. But if they could, maybe be around 500, I think that's going to be a good season for the Browns. And I think the Bengals just need one more year to regroup. Maybe next year they'll be less of a rebuilding team and more of like a buying team. And if Joe Burrow can keep playing well, the Bengals are going to have a good time. They're going to have a good future. I think you should be excited as a Bengals fan. Shouldn't be too sad as a Browns fan. But Browns came out on top for the Battle of Ohio. Entertaining game. So overall, I think it was a great Thursday night football game.
Yeah, and on the topic of, Baker Mayfield, they definitely rely on the run a lot, but that helped Baker succeed. It helped that play action game get going. The play action was really good, and Baker was playing really well with the play action. And when the run game was working for them, he was really able to move the ball and get people involved in the passing game. So I feel like if they his 5th-year option is coming up, they're gonna have to make a decision this offseason. They're gonna choose whether they want to have him for 2 more years after the season at least, or only just 1 at least. So, I think it depends on how he plays the rest of the season. I think, he looked, if they can just keep him around, and if they can keep their running game strong with Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt, especially Nick Chubb, he's a great young runner. I think he's amazing. He's a north-south runner. So if they keep them around and this run game stays strong, and I think that Baker and the Browns could really succeed. I think they just need to figure out the defense a little more. There's Baker scoring 35, but the defense is allowing 30 points to a rookie quarterback in only a second game. So that's definitely a problem. On the defensive side, and they're letting him throw 61 times on him and be successful, especially as a rookie. So then you figure out the defense. I think the Baker can be really good in the future, and the running game is gonna be really good in the future. And they just need to figure out that defense. And then for the Bengals and Joe Burrow, you pretty much covered it. Yeah, Joe Burrow looked great. To throw 61 times and be that successful is phenomenal. So he's definitely, his confidence should be sky high right now. And even though the Bengals lost, their own two, so obviously he's very competitive. He's definitely probably upset that they lost, but he should definitely be happy, and Bengals fans should be happy with what they saw out of him in that game. The Bengals, they come out and they're going at the Eagles next game in week 3, so we'll see. I don't think they'll win that game, but you never know what can happen. The Eagles lost to the football team. No one thought that would happen, so who knows? Joe Burrow could come out and absolutely destroy the Eagles' defense. You never know. Okay. So overall, just two good games for both teams. Really, I think both fans should be happy. Neither of these teams really have. I don't think either of these teams have realistic playoff aspirations. I think some people think the Browns have a chance of sneaking in there in the playoffs. I don't personally, but so overall, just both teams are kind of looking for potential for the future in the next couple of years, and I think that they both fans of both teams should be happy with what they saw this Thursday night. Let's move into our NFL weekend review. We'll go game by game very quickly. Jack will take a team. I will take a team. We'll just kind of go over how the game went for them. We'll start with Seahawks versus the Falcons. I'll take the Falcons. Overall for the Falcons, defensive side of the ball, Russell Wilson absolutely torched them. That was not good. Then again, it is Russell Wilson. And then in terms of the run game, the Seahawks didn't run it that much, but when they did, the Falcons were able to stop it relatively well. Chris Carson and Carlos Hyde both had under 4 yards per carry. So that is one positive. And on the offensive side of the ball, Gurley looked pretty good. He had 56 yards and a touchdown. And then Matt Ryan also, he were 450 yards, but then again, he did throw it 54 times. So what do you expect? Julio was amazing. Calvin Ridley was amazing. And also Russell Gage had an emergence with 9 receptions and 114 yards.
It was also a good game for the Seahawks. They weren't doing good in the running game, but the passing game was looking really good. Russell Wilson had 322 yards and 4 touchdowns. Chris Carson, I believe, had 2 touchdowns. Receiving, and DK, Lockett, everyone was catching the ball and everyone was getting yards. So it looks really good if you're a Seahawks fan, and I think they're a contender. Maybe a dark horse, not really dark horse contender for the Super Bowl, but they're looking like a really good team. Disappointing game for the Falcons, but they'll bounce back.
Next game, Browns versus Ravens. I'll take the Ravens. Nothing much to say here. Just a great game all on for the Ravens. They shut down the Browns on defense, and they were explosive on offense. Lamar, Hollywood Brown, they were great. That's pretty much all I really have to say here. It's just overall great team performance by the Ravens.
Yeah, and pretty disappointing game for the Browns, especially Baker. We talked about Baker earlier. He had a bounce-back game. But I think if they can keep playing like they did against the Bengals, they're going to be perfectly fine. But I don't think anyone really had them winning against the Ravens. The Ravens are just too strong right now. Still looking really good for the Ravens. And after that game against the Bengals, looking pretty good for the Browns too. Maybe not a playoff team, but looking good.
Next game, Colts versus Jaguars. Disappointing loss for the Colts. You can't let Gardner Minshew be 19 for 20 on you. It doesn't matter if it's Gardner Minshew or if it's Joe Montana. It's like you can't let someone throw 90 for 20 on you if you're going to have defense. If you want defense, you want your strengths. So defense has to bounce back against the Vikings. And also Phillip Rivers, he had a good game minus the 2 picks, but you can't really expect him not to throw picks when they're making him throw it 46 times when they said they were going to commit to the run. So they got to commit to the run against the Vikings. I think that interior D-line could be slashed apart by the Colts interior O-line. Jonathan Taylor can have a big game. And also I think Phillip Rivers might have a little more success against the Vikings' lackluster secondary.
Amazing game for the Jaguars. Colts kind of lost to a team that's trying to lose. I still think the Colts are better, but that's a really disappointing loss, probably because of the run game. Gardner Minshew, absolutely incredible efficiency. He went 9 for 20, 173 yards and 3 touchdowns. Really, everyone was getting the ball. Good game for Laviska Shenault. 3 receptions for 37 yards, 12.3 average, and 1 touchdown. The run game was looking pretty good, too, with James Robinson, but I don't think they're going to be able to play like this their next game. It was just a fluke game for the Colts, but looking pretty bad for the Colts and actually looking pretty good for the Jaguars.
Yeah, I think, Jaguars, I don't think they're going to be one of the worst teams anymore. I think this definitely shows that they can be good. I think they'll be around where they were last year, like 6-10, 5-11 to 7-9. They were 6-10 last year. Next game, the Jets at the Bills. I will take the Jets. So the Jets, obviously, it was disappointing that they lost to the Bills. They kind of had a little bit of a late push towards the end. They scored that one touchdown with Josh Adams, but overall, just like really, it wasn't a great game for the Jets, and they're going to have to bounce back. They're not looking good. Sam Darnold, he did not look good. Their running game was absolutely atrocious. They only ran it 15 times, and for 52 yards, that was terrible. And then it's just overall not a great game for the Jets.
Yeah, it was a really good game for the Bills. They're a good team coming in. Josh Allen went 33 for 46 yards, 212 yards, 2 touchdowns. They heavily relied on, not really heavily relied on receiving, but Josh Allen carried it 14 times for 57 yards, Devin Singletary 9 times for 30 yards, Zach Moss also 9 times. So it looks like they're really focusing on Josh Allen the entire game, especially in the passing game. Diggs had 86 yards, Brown had 70, Cole Beasley had 58. So it was actually a really good game for the Bills. Good defensive performance, one pick. But yeah, if you're a Bills fan, you should be pretty happy. The game looked really good.
Next game, Raiders Panthers. I'll take the Raiders. The Raiders had some players looked great. Josh Jacobs obviously with 93 yards and those 3 touchdowns. Derek Carr was very efficient. 1 touchdown, no picks, 22 for 30 with 239 yards. Also Henry Ruggs, the rookie, he had 3 catches, 55 yards. He was actually the leading receiver for the Raiders. He looked nice, and he also had 1 catch that was just out of bounds, but a very acrobatic catch. So Henry Ruggs, looking like that number 1 receiver off the board, looking like the Raiders looks like the Raiders hit a home run on that pick. One thing I will say though is don't get too hyped on the Raiders. They beat the Panthers, yes, but they also let the Panthers score 30 points on them. They're only able to win by 4. And DJ Moore had a quiet game, and McCaffrey, he had 2 touchdowns and 96 yards. But from McCaffrey standards, that's pretty like normal. So it's not like normally when the Panthers are scoring a lot of points, normally McCaffrey's kind of popping off, but that didn't happen today. It was really Teddy Bridgewater, and so I think the Raiders will have less success against better quarterbacks.
Yeah, and it was really just a questionable decision at the end of the game, which I think, maybe giving it to McCaffrey may have changed the story. The Vegas fans, or I should say Raiders, because more people are kind of used to saying Raiders instead of Vegas these days. But the Raiders fans, you can't get so hyped for the Raiders after beating the Panthers by 4 points. It's the Panthers. Bridgewater did have a good game, though. McCaffrey, not disappointing by any means. That's a good game for anyone else, but for Christian McCaffrey, I'd say that's pretty average, like you said. Pretty disappointing on defense. No picks. No sacks either, which is kind of surprising. But, Raiders had a good game. Panthers had a pretty disappointing game. But if they were playing like the best they could, if Christian McCaffrey popped off and, you said DJ Moore had a disappointing game, it would have been a very different story, especially without some questionable decision-making. But I don't think either of these two teams are going to be incredible this season. But, it was a pretty entertaining game, but really not the best one on Thursday night. Or not Thursday night. Not the best one week 1.
Yeah, I mean, overall, not knocking Teddy Bridgewater, but, the Raiders, there's some really good quarterbacks in the division, Patrick Mahomes. And against Patrick Mahomes, I think it'll be a lot different for that defense. Also, and by the way, Josh Jacobs looking like he's gonna be a star. Chicago at Detroit, so I'll take the Bears. So obviously the Bears pulled out that late win. Lions could have won that. DeAndre Swift dropped it in the end zone, but it's at the end. It's a team effort. Not one player won, one player lost it. So the Bears were able to win. Mitch Trubisky played great that game, especially late. And overall, it was just a good win for the Bears. I don't expect them really to make the playoffs. Obviously, again, this was the Lions, a team that I expect to be one of the worst teams this year. So I wouldn't get too excited. Kind of same thing with the Raiders. Like you won, but you also beat a team that isn't the best of teams. So it's still good to see Mitch Trubisky have success, though.
Yeah, and it's really the Lions doing Lions things. Matt Stafford, he had a good game. He had one interception, one touchdown, though, which is pretty bad. He had just around 300 yards, 24-42, so maybe not the best game. But Adrian Peterson kind of put the team on his back a little bit there with his rushing yards. But, you know, it's just pretty disappointing if you're a Lions fan. Swift had a really disappointing game. He only had 3 carries for 8 yards and dropping that game-winning touchdown at the end. Really, Matt Prater kind of putting the team on his back, 3 for 4. But it's just really disappointing if you're a Lions fan. I mean, I guess you're kind of used to it already. Losing to the Bears isn't really the best thing, especially when Mr. Trubisky didn't show up until late game. So if you're a Lions fan, that's just really sad. I'm sorry. That was a really disappointing game and pretty hard to watch.
Yeah, all right. Next game, Packers, Vikings. The Vikings, there's a clear positive is the offense. Kirk Cousins was able to throw all over that secondary, which is a pretty good secondary if I do say so myself, with Adrian Amos, Jair Alexander, Kevin King, and emerging young safety Darnell Savage. Plus, he was only sacked 2 times by a good D line, Kenny Clark and Zadarius Smith, on the edge. So, but the negative, obviously, is the defense. You cannot let Aaron Rodgers throw for 364 yards and 4 touchdowns and not even sack him once. It's just not good. Aaron Jones also had a good game as well. They couldn't really stop the run. The Packers had 158 total rush yards. They couldn't stop anybody. That's just the fact of the matter. The Packers were able to do whatever they want on offense. So they got to improve that going into the Colts game, or else they're not going to come out of there with a win.
Yeah, and what a game for the Packers. The Packers are really slept on this season, in my opinion. A lot of people were like, oh, the Cowboys are going to win the Super Bowl. And everyone kind of forgot about the Packers a little bit there. And everyone a lot of big sources were like, oh, Aaron Rodgers didn't even put him in their top 10 quarterback list. How could you not put this man in your top 10 quarterback list? 364 yards, 4 touchdowns. The running game was pretty good. Devontae Adams, 156 yards, 2 touchdowns. Valdez Scantling, 1 touchdown, 96 yards. Alan Lazard, 63 yards, 1 touchdown, and on 4 receptions. Well, both Valdez Scantling and Lazard had 4 receptions, still had that many yards. But Devontae Adams really torched that defense. This is a stellar game for the Packers. Obviously, they gave up 34 points, but the Vikings are not a bad team by any means. But, I mean, what an entertaining game. It was just an absolute shootout. It was a high-scoring game. Such a great game. And, don't sleep on the Packers this season. The Packers are going to be good. Aaron Rodgers is going to be good. He's kind of got a chip on his shoulder. Devontae Adams, in my opinion, is going to have a great season. So just don't sleep on the Packers.
Yeah, people forget they were the 2 seed last year and went to the NFC Championship. So they're still a really good team, and they didn't really get that much worse. Next game, Dolphins Patriots. I'll take the Dolphins. So the Dolphins, disappointing, were only able to muster 11 points. Then again, it is Bill Belichick, one of the greatest defensive minds of all time, if not the greatest defensive mind, and if not the greatest head coach in general of all time. Obviously Ryan Fitzpatrick might be on the hot seat now, throwing 3 picks and no touchdowns, which is definitely not ideal. They should definitely not throw Tua into the fire too early. I think they keep Ryan Fitzpatrick around for at least a couple more weeks, even if he doesn't play up to standards. But for now, and it's just overall, their defense played okay. They only allowed 21 points, which is just pretty average. It's just they couldn't really stop the run for the Patriots, who had 217 rushing yards. So that's one thing they got to work on, is stopping that run game.
Yeah, and like you said, Fitzpatrick is not looking like Fitzmagic right now. He's really looking like Fitztragic. But good game for the Patriots, Cam Newton, 15 for 19, 155 yards. No touchdowns in the air or interceptions. But he did put the running game on his back. 15 carries for 75 yards and 2 touchdowns. It was just a pretty good game overall. They obviously got worse as a team. A lot worse, if you could say, but Bill Belichick is really going to carry him. Cam Newton, he's playing well. He's got a chip on his shoulder. Usually I say don't sleep on teams. I wouldn't say don't sleep on the Patriots. I don't think they're going to have a stellar season, probably not even a playoff team. But good game for Cam Newton. Everyone was sleeping on Cam Newton. Kind of put the game on his back with his rushing. He had decent passing, but, it was a pretty good game. And I think Cam Newton's going to be really fun to watch this season. We're going to have to see what he does.
Yeah, and the Dolphins defense, they brought in a lot of good talent in the offseason. This still is week 1, and a lot of their defensive faces are new. So I think the next week and weeks down the road, I think the Dolphins defense will develop better chemistry with each other. with no preseason and limited training camp, it was tough. And on the Patriots, on the other hand, there was a lot of opt-outs, lost a lot of guys in defense, but the defense was still successful. So I think that, like you said, Cam's going to be good, and Cam played well. But overall, I think that this team will either barely sneak into the playoffs or they'll miss it by just a little bit. Next game, Eagles versus the football team. The Eagles with a disappointing loss to the Washington football team. Carson Wentz with 2 touchdowns, but also 2 interceptions. Did there for 270 yards. He threw 42 times, though. Like I said, with Philip Rivers, it's hard to expect guys not to throw picks when you're making them throw it a ton. Then again, you can be efficient, though, as we've seen from Joe Burrow. The running game was not good, only 57 yards. Dallas Goedert, though, had a good game. I will say that. And Jalen Reagor had that 1 catch for 55 yards, which definitely shows some promise there. And also they lost 3 total fumbles. So I just think overall that they just need to really improve going into next week against the Rams, or else the Rams are going to come out and win that game.
Yeah, and surprising game for the football team. Washington with 20 unanswered points, I believe. And Dwayne Haskins, a lot of people are calling him a bust. He had a good game. He went 17 for 31, 178 yards and a touchdown. It's not stellar, but it's pretty decent. Running game wasn't amazing in yardage, but Peyton Barber had 2 touchdowns. Uh, Overall, just pretty surprising game. I thought the Eagles were definitely going to beat Washington, but if you can't score, or if you let them score 20 points without scoring a single point, that's just really disappointing. The Eagles started off strong with 10 points first quarter, 2 points or 7 points in the second quarter, but really just 0 points the third and fourth quarter while you let them score 7 and 13. That's just pretty disappointing, especially losing to Washington, losing to Washington by 10 points. That is very disappointing. Washington doesn't look like a terrible team. Obviously, they're still one of the worst teams in the league, but Eagles really have to step it up, and if Washington can keep riding this, they're going to actually have a really surprising season.
I mean, yeah, but it was actually 27 unanswered points, so it was 17-0. Then the final score was 27-17. Chase Young very good, by the way. Chargers Bengals next game. Joe Burrow's debut. He had an okay game. It wasn't anything super special. I think he had a much better game against the Browns. He had just under 200 yards, but also had 0 touchdowns and a pick. But one thing I will say, in both his first 2 games, he was great down the stretch. He was able to drive down the field. Against the Chargers, he'll drive down the field and get into field goal range and get what should have been an easy field goal, but the kicker seemed to have pulled a muscle on the kick. And then also against the Browns late in the game, he was able to drive down and have a nice throw to Tyler Boyd in the end zone to score. Even though it was in garbage time, they still had a chance to win it because of the onside kick. Weren't able to get that. But overall, Joe Burrow's looking good. He's driving down the field late in games, and he played. Like I said, he played an okay game. But then again, it's against a very, very good Chargers defense. So I think that definitely makes the game a lot better, especially in your first game ever.
Yeah, and really good game for the Chargers defense. I mean, I wouldn't say really good. That's kind of disappointing, especially with some of the injuries that we sustained. Sadly, we had Drew Tranquil go out with a severe injury. He's going to be out for the whole season, but Anthony Lynn said don't write him out yet. I don't really know what he means by that, but I really hope Drew Tranquil can get better soon. We had a few sacks. Offensive line couldn't hold the Chargers. I think it was 3 sacks. Casey Hayward winning Defensive Player of the Week. But incredibly disappointing game for the Chargers offense. Passing game especially. Tyrod Taylor, 16 for 30, 208 yards, 0 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. Hunter Henry and Mike Williams had good games, but I really think it was the rushing in this game that kind of carried the Chargers here. Austin Eckler with 19 rushes for 84 yards. And Joshua Kelly, one of our rookies, had a great surprise game. I don't think anyone thought this. I mean, I've always trusted him. I saw him play at UCLA. He's a phenomenal player. 12 carries for 60 yards and a touchdown. Looking really promising. But the Chargers really have to step up their offense if they're going to even want to stand a chance against the Chiefs, because their defense can hold on their own, but the offense really needs to do something. Tyrod needs to step it up. If he can keep the yards, he's just got to get more touchdowns. I think they're going to be good. But it's going to be an exciting game to get the Chiefs. Obviously, I think they're not going to be able to win, but Chargers are looking pretty decent. Bengals are looking good, especially after the game against the Browns. So, pretty entertaining game. Pretty good.
Yeah, Tyrod was only 53% completion percentage, not great. And they're only able to score 16 points against um, not great Bills defense. So I honestly, for the Chiefs game, no offense, Jack, I feel like the Chiefs are probably going to score. They might end up scoring all over that Chargers defense. But who knows? The Chargers have a great defense. I could also see the Chargers coming out and make it a low scoring battle. That's how the Chargers are going to win games this year. They're going to be low scoring games, and if they can do that against the Chiefs, the Colts last year, they did that against the Chiefs, who ended up going on to win the Super Bowl. A fully healthy Chiefs too. They won a game. Both scored 120 points. So the Chargers can do that in week 2. Next game, Buccaneers Saints. So the Saints obviously came out with the win. Their defense made Tom Brady very uncomfortable. He did not have a great game. Gronk, he had a very quiet game with only 2 receptions for 11 yards. I personally am not I'm not jumping on the hype train for Gronk coming in Tampa. He's not going to be one of the best of the season. He hasn't played for a whole year, and he hasn't played a full season since 2011. I already mentioned that in past episodes. And then also Tampa Bay as a whole, I think they could potentially be a Super Bowl contender, but I would not predict it. But overall, the Saints, Drew Brees, he played well. He was efficient. He threw 2 touchdowns and no picks. Taysom Hill had a 38-yard completion. And then the running game was okay, only 82 yards. But overall, just a great game for the team as a whole. Kamara had a great game with 2 total touchdowns. And like I said, the defense played well, made Tom Brady very uncomfortable.
Yeah, and Tom Brady didn't have a bad game until you look at his interceptions. 2 interceptions, that's really not what you want to see. 239 yards, 2 touchdowns, 23 for 36. So not an amazing game, but not a terrible game either. Just if you could just describe it with one word, disappointing. Disappointing game for really everyone. Ronald Jones had a pretty good game, 17 carries for 66 yards. Chris Godwin had a good game. Scott Miller had a good game, but pretty disappointing game for the Buccaneers. A lot of people saw them as Super Bowl contenders, and you can't really come out and play like that if you think or if you want to be a Super Bowl contender. But I think they'll bounce back. They just got to get some chemistry going. They got a lot of new guys, especially Tom Brady. But looking good for the Saints. Not really looking good for the Buccaneers, but I think they can pick it up. And I think they'll come back even stronger next week.
Next game, Cardinals, 49ers. For the Niners, definitely a tough loss for, just another upset week 1. For the Niners, Colts, Eagles both suffered some. Both were on the bad end of some big upsets. But, in terms of the 49ers, Super Bowl hangover is a real thing. We've seen it. The only team that's been immune to it in recent years is the Patriots. But last year, the Rams came out and missed the playoffs the very next year. Just barely missed it, though. The year before that was the year that the Patriots lost, and they came back on the Super Bowl the next year. So it seems like they're the only ones that are immune to it. It happened to the Falcons. It happened to the Panthers. It happened to the Seahawks. It happens to the team that loses the Super Bowl. Unless they're the Tom Brady, Bill Belichick Patriots, they're going to come out and they're not going to have a very successful season the next season. That's been the theme. So 49ers, we'll see what happens the rest of the season. I mean, I could potentially the entirety of the NFC West making the playoffs, but because there are a bunch of great teams there. But overall, the 49ers, 49ers fans, you've got to cross your fingers that you guys are immune to the Super Bowl hangover. But because right now, it's looking like it's affecting you.
Yeah, but great game for the Cardinals. I mean, passing wise, Kyler Murray had a decent game, 26 for 40, 230 yards and a touchdown and an interception. Kind of brings that down a little bit. But Kyler's looking really promising, and he's absolutely lighting the defense up, especially with DeAndre Hopkins. I just got to applaud the Texans for that move. DeAndre Hopkins, 14 receptions for 151 yards, no touchdowns, though. The rushing game really were the ones scoring the points. Kyler Murray, 13 carries, 91 yards and a touchdown, and Kenyon Drake, 16 carries, 60 yards and a touchdown. This team is looking good. This team is pretty underrated, in my opinion. The defense was looking pretty decent. Obviously, they only won by 4 points, but they're coming out against a team that was favored coming out. I mean, obviously, Super Bowl hangover, kind of a myth, but it's also a thing. Coming out, scoring 24 against the 7, or I was about to say 76ers. Sorry, The 49ers, they scored 20, only won by 4, which isn't amazing, but a good game for the Cardinals. Looking really promising. They haven't really been good in recent years or good at any time ever. But this is really looking like their time. I think in a few more years, they're going to be one of the best teams in the league. Right now, they're already, I'd say, above mid-tier, maybe not top tier, but they're looking like a good team.
Yeah, and I just want to say one thing before we move on to the Sunday night game. If DeAndre Hopkins has a career year, I'm just wondering what does that say about Deshaun Watson? Like, yes, he has a bad line, but so does Kyler Murray. So if DeAndre Hopkins comes out and has like a career year, like, and it does this all season, I don't know what's it going to say about Deshaun Watson, or maybe not just Deshaun Watson, but just the Texans organization as a whole, but also Deshaun Watson because he's also, Hopkins also had a good supporting cast, and Will Fuller was good. Kiki Kuchi showed some flashes sometimes. Like, I mean, just overall, like, I just don't know. We'll just see. We'll just see where it goes. Sunday night game, Rams Cowboys. That was a very entertaining game. The Rams came out on top. Some people expected the Cowboys to win. I predicted the Rams to win personally. But it was close in my mind, so I didn't put my fortune for. Goff had a good game, but he did not throw a single touchdown, but he did throw an interception. So that's one thing. He struggled with picks last year. We'll see where it goes from here. And with a lackluster Cowboys secondary, I think he definitely should have had a little bit of a better game. He had a good game, but it should have been great against the Cowboys defense. But the run game was great, 153 yards, and they rushed it 40 times. And then Robert Woods had a great game. Just overall, really good game for the Rams. They didn't make that many errors. There was only that one pick, no fumbles though. So it was just great. Good game overall for the Rams. And, people doubt the Rams, I think, a little bit too much going into the season. They were 9-7 last year, and now it's a down season. They're going to bounce back this year. They don't have that Todd Gurley, is he healthy, is he not situation anymore. Less pressure on Goff. They can trust their running game now because they don't know. It's not going to be so wildly inconsistent. They know what it's like. And obviously last year they would have made it with the current playoff format. So good job to the Rams.
Yeah, and Cowboys had a chance to win that game, but I kind of questionable decision making by Mike McCarthy. But overall, it was a really entertaining game. I think if the Rams played they did early on, that would have been even bigger score because they looked like they were about to blow out the Dallas Cowboys there. But kind of slowed down, allowed 14 points second quarter, but held them to 3 over the third and fourth quarter. But pretty good game for Zeke. It was kind of funny. There's a lot of memes going around, Zeke on third and 19, getting 4 yards, doing his little eat from the bowl thing. That's pretty funny. But
Jack, are you there? Looks like we lost you, Jack. I'll finish this off for you. Like you said, Zeke had a good game, but overall the Cowboys just kind of probably a little disappointed by that they weren't able to pull out the win there. Moving on to Monday night, Steelers-Giants. For the Giants, they kept it pretty low scoring until 9 minutes left in the second quarter where Big Ben kind of took control and ended up pulling out the win 26-10. The Giants scored one more touchdown in garbage time, so it was 26-16, but really that was just, like I said, garbage time. Daniel Jones, he was good, two touchdowns, 2 picks, okay. The one thing, though, they ran the ball for 29 yards. That's not okay. They got to be better than that. Saquon Barkley had 15 rushing attempts for 6 yards. 15 rushing attempts for 6 yards. That's 0.4 yards per carry. That's terrible. That's just all it is. That's absolutely terrible. He had a good game receiving, 6 receptions for 60 yards, but that's not good. That's terrible. His own quarterback had more rushing yards than him. Big Ben had more rushing yards than Saquon Barkley. That is just, I don't know what happened. I'm not blaming Saquon. Obviously, it's partly his fault. It's partly the Steelers' D's fault they're doing, and also the O-line. But just overall, they got to come out next week and run the ball a lot better against the Bears, or else they're going to have no chance whatsoever. Saquon Barkley's their best player on offense by far, if not their best player overall. They got to run the ball way better.
yeah, and Big Ben's first game back, he had a great game, 229 yards, 3 touchdowns. Benny Snell Jr. rushing 113 yards, averaging 6 yards per carry, 19 carries. It was a good game for the Steelers, looking really good. they're a good team. The defense was looking pretty good. Letting the Giants score 16 points isn't amazing, but holding Saquon to 6 yards, that is how you play football. TJ Watt, kind of with a disappointing game. He had one tackle, but he did have one interception. So it was a really good game for the Steelers. The Giants, kind of disappointing. I mean, I don't think anyone really expected that much from the Giants. I think if Daniel Jones cannot throw 2 interceptions, it'd be a lot better. And if Saquon would not rush for 6 yards, it would have been a different story. But, disappointing for the Giants. Good game for the Steelers.
Final game, Broncos, Titans. Broncos, Drew Lock had a pretty good game. 1 touchdown, no picks. Melvin Gordon had a pretty good game, 78 yards, 1 touchdown. Noah Fant had a good game. There was lots of bright spots for that team. Obviously, Courtland Sutton wasn't playing. I think if he was playing, they would have ended up winning that. I said my fortune 4. I said bet on the Broncos if they got Sutton. Don't if they do. They still ended up covering. So hopefully you took my advice. Actually, no. Hopefully you didn't take my advice. Hopefully you did bet on them. Even though I said if they didn't have Sutton, I would bet on them. But I was kind of right there. But overall, it was close in the end. But Derrick Henry still rushed for 116 yards, and Corey Davis had 101 receiving yards on them. So overall good game for the Titans. And I think the Broncos are going to probably have to win a little more high-scoring games. They're going to probably want to score more if they're going to want to win games. They're going to be proud. I think they're going to rely on their offense a little more than the defense this year. So they got to try to make it more high-scoring going into next week against the Steelers.
Yeah, and pretty disappointing game for the Broncos, in my opinion. It looks like a close game, but the Broncos had a chance. They were getting bailed out by Gostkowski, who went 1 for 4. But I think he missed one extra point. That you just can't kick like that. But people can't really hate on kickers. You don't really notice them when they're doing good. When they're doing bad, you kind of hate on them. A terrible week for kicking in the NFL, probably just because kind of the momentum shift and it's just kind of an odd time. But the Broncos, you were really bailed out. Titans kicking was not looking good. The Titans weren't looking like the best team they could be, and I think the Broncos really failed to capitalize on what was given to them. But they didn't have a terrible game. Drew Lock is looking good. Melvin Gordon, like you said, was pretty decent. But you really got to capitalize on those opportunities, especially the one that was given this game. Losing by 2 points isn't bad, but when the Titans miss 3 kicks and 1 extra point, you really got to capitalize on that, and you really got to punish them for that.
All right, let's move into our next segment. We're going to be talking about the Clippers' surprising loss to the Nuggets in Game 7. The Nuggets came back from 3-1 again and were able to beat the Clippers by 15 points. Jamal Murray was great. He had 40 points. Nikola Jokic was the first player in NBA history, I believe, to have a 20-plus rebound triple-double in 3 quarters, I believe, was the record. I'm not sure, but overall, just a great game for the Nuggets and not a great game for the Clippers. They blew a 3-1 lead. It was just not a good series overall. Kawhi Leonard, that's what you call a choke job late in the game. And also Paul George didn't play well. Just overall, none of the Clippers stars played well at all. Montrezl Harrell was the only one you could say had a decent game, and also Jameisha Green had 11 points. That's pretty good for him being a role player. Just overall, I don't know. It's just they're the Clippers, man. This just happens. Doc Rivers is kind of cursed a little bit, and it's just tough for because the Clippers are. They're moving into a new stadium soon, I believe. They're going to be building a new one right by the Forum. It's just I just don't know what happened to the Clippers, man. It's tough to analyze this. It's not what happened. Just what happened to the Clippers, man. We all thought it was going to be the Battle of LA in the Western Conference Finals. I actually really wanted to see that, but it was kind of bittersweet for me. Bitter because I wanted to see the Lakers and Clippers play. Sweet because I do not like the Clippers as just a Lakers fan. I did not like them. And I'm glad to see them out of the playoffs. It was a disappointing loss. If the Clippers don't get a win with Kawhi and Paul George, something's going to have to change in terms of coaching and probably not management because obviously there's nothing wrong with what they've been doing. They've built a very good roster. So I don't know. We'll just have to see where it goes from here for Clippers. But on the other hand, the Nuggets were very, very good. They've got a chance of beating the Lakers. They're a good team. And obviously we know if the Lakers go up 3-0, we can't count out the Nuggets. The Nuggets are going to be in it all series, no matter what the series total is. So overall, I just think that's going to be entertaining series. I think for the Nuggets and the Lakers, because really every game is going to be important because we've seen what the Nuggets can do. They can come back, and we know LeBron can come back from big deficits. So we'll see. We'll just have to see. It's going to be very entertaining, and I'm excited.
Yeah, and the Clippers looked bad. Um, sure do think that they kind of regret giving that much or giving up that much for Shea. Um, so Paul George, Kawhi, they're obviously in win now mode, but you can't lose 3-1 like that. You're a contender for the finals. You were a favorite, one of the favorites for the finals, and people talk about how the Bucks losing to the Heat was disappointing, and obviously that was, but the Clippers were probably a better team in my opinion because they're more well equipped with Kawhi and Paul George. But you really just can't lose like that. That's just really disappointing. Um, this is where it gets entertaining. We're an immovable object meets an unstoppable force. Lakers losing game one, winning all the games, and then Nuggets going down 3-1. But it's actually been really entertaining. It was a really entertaining series. It was really fun to watch. As a non-Clippers fan, as a Clippers hater, you could say, it was really entertaining watching the Clippers lose that. Now we're going to have a stellar series with the Nuggets versus the Lakers. I think the Lakers are still going to win, but you never know what's going to happen because Bucks obviously lost to the Heat, and Heat might even beat the Celtics right now, so you really just never know what's going to happen. I think it's going to be a great series.
It'd be cool to see the Lakers Heat, LeBron rematch for the Heat. But yeah, first game's tonight, Lakers Nuggets. And the Lakers are favored by 7 points, so it's gonna be fun to watch. So we're gonna have no question episode today, guys. So our final segment is gonna be my Fortune 4 picks. So last week, it was average. That's what it was. Just straight average, 500. I was 2 for 2. I got the Broncos +3 right, and I also got my Bears pick right. I did not get my Dolphins pick right, and I did not get my Colts pick right. So this week I plan on improving on that. 2-2 is not bad, but it's also not good. So just pretty middle of the pack. My first Fortune 4 pick is going to be the Bills -5.5 of the Dolphins. I think they can definitely win this by more than a touchdown. Not knocking the Dolphins. I still think they could be a sneaky team, maybe kind of get close to the playoffs. Depends on how Fitzpatrick plays the rest of the season, or if they play in Tua, who knows. But overall, I think the Bills just definitely can come out on top of this by more than a touchdown. If we look at team statistics, the Bills kind of just dominate in almost every stat. They had more points. They allowed less points. They had more yards. They allowed less yards. So it just – and that was in week one, Obviously, Miami was playing a better team. Patriots are better than the Jets, in my opinion. But overall, I think that the Bills definitely can win this by more than 5.5 points. I would like to say, though, also lines do go up and down after I make my Fortune 4 picks. So if the line is different whenever you're hearing this, then don't flame me or anything. That might have happened last week, I think. But it's just I'm going by the line right now. My next pick for my Fortune 4 is going to be the San Francisco 49ers -7 the Jets. Yes, that's a big line. And yes, the San Francisco 49ers came off a big, a bad loss. But the Cardinals are a good team. Don't underestimate them. I think they'll be able to make the playoffs this year with the 3 wildcard format. And the Niners, on the other hand, I think are a way better team than the Jets, and I think they're going to blow them out this week. So I think this is a game that you could definitely bet on and expect the Niners to win. It's kind of risky to bet on a big line like that, but I think it's definitely a possibility that you could that the 49ers will blow them out. Next pick is a Seahawks -4. I think the Seahawks will win this by a good amount. They're not going to blow out the Patriots by any means, but I just think that Russell Wilson is too good to win this by less than a touchdown at home. I think he's going to win by at least 7 points. I don't think the Patriots are going to be able to keep this low scoring like they did with the Dolphins. I think Cam might struggle a little more playing from behind. The Patriots are going to have a tough time playing from behind when they're not going to be able to use the run game as much. But we'll see. This will be a real test to Cam, see how he can do throwing the football, because I think they're going to be playing from behind or playing in a high-scoring game a good amount this game. So I bet on the Seahawks to win this one, -4. And then my final pick is the Monday night game, Saints Vegas. I'm betting on the Saints plus -5.5. So, yes, I'm betting on a bunch of favorites this week. But, I just think overall the Saints -5.5. The Raiders, yes, like we said, they beat the Panthers. But then again, it's the Panthers, and it wasn't like Christian McCaffrey was playing a career game. DJ Moore had a below-average game. Like, Teddy Bridgewater and Drew Brees are two totally different animals. If Teddy Bridgewater is going to drop 30 points in your head, Drew Brees is going to drop 100. So I just don't see the Raiders being able to stop Drew Brees almost at all this game, or Kamara, or Michael Thomas might be out, but Josh Jacobs, they weren't able to stop Josh Jacobs. I don't think they're going to be able to stop Kamara. It's just going to be really tough for the Raiders, I feel like, to bring this within a touchdown. So that's same thing with the Bills. I feel like it's a touchdown under a spread here. I mean, the spread under a touchdown here. I just don't see that happening. I see the Saints winning by at least a touchdown. I see them winning by double digits. If I had to break the score right now, I'd go 31-17. That's going to wrap it up, guys, for today's episode. Thank you for watching. If you did enjoy, remember to like, subscribe, follow, whatever, to show your support if you enjoyed. And remember to leave suggestions down below in the comment section if you're watching on YouTube. And remember, check us out on Podbean or YouTube, depending on where you're listening to. And have a great day. And we will see you in 1 week. Bye-bye.